Thanks for tuning in to As the Tire Turns podcast. Before we dive into this week's episode, I'd like to thank our sponsor, AME International. Tire professionals insist on AME. I'd also like to recognize the AACF. For over 65 years, the Automotive Aftermarket Charitable Foundation has stood by those in the automotive aftermarket industry and their families during life's toughest challenges. Since 1959, with the incredible support of industry partners, AACF has provided vital assistance to individuals and families facing financial hardship due to unforeseen circumstances, such as floods, earthquakes, storms, fires, catastrophic medical conditions, life-changing accidents, devastating fatalities, and more. AACF offers a straightforward application process and a quick turnaround time for those needing support during critical moments. Visit www.aftermarketcharity.org to access the application and learn more about how AACF can assist during times of need. Together, we can make a difference in the lives of our automotive aftermarket family. Support AACF today. And now, As the Tire Turns. We're back with another episode of As the Tire Turns. Today I'm joined by Chris Brothen. Chris, friend.
Oh, brother.
Mentor, brother from another mother, confidant, but today guest.
Oh, thank you.
So thanks for joining us on the podcast. This is really a reflection of my years as president of the Tire Industry Association and some of the people who've made a difference in my career and people I've met along the way and some of the movers and shakers of past, present, and future. So anyway, your path, a lot of people I'm curious to see is how they end up in the tire industry. And that was really a second career for you, wasn't it? What was your, at least the second?
No, actually, Keith, it would have been my third or fourth career.
So I know you had a little engineering to do with, and born in Alberta?
Born in, I was going to say, it's Edmonton. We've always had that joke about Edmonton, but I won't say the Edmonton, which is a fine place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so energy, I would imagine, was your first path?
Well, yeah.
Or environmental?
No, it was in the energy business. I did a number of jobs after graduation, and mostly related to engineering, and ended up actually working for up in the Arctic. After I had left a job, I was a superintendent of a construction company. And I left that job in 1984 and went at the prompting of my father, who worked for the Exxon Corporation for like 40 years. And I ended up in the Arctic, in the offshore drilling in the Beaufort Sea, which was an experience, I have to say. I mean, it was pretty tough.
On a rig?
On a rig, but the intent, my job entailed a lot of things, but as the world turns, what they do is that they make sure you are adept at all of the functions. So yes, I did work on a rig, but the concept was for me to end up being in their construction services department, where we were trying to stabilize the shores of the islands. Some of them were built right to the surface and some were built under the surface. You'd tow a drilling rig on and then drill for oil.
Okay.
So that 28 days in and 10 days out, we had a brand new child, and ended up that not being the way to conduct a family.
Yeah.
Or start a family. So I ended up working for a municipal government, believe it or not. I went in for a job interview, and I sat around a U-shaped table with 7 rural counselors, and they interviewed me, and they phoned me on my truck on the way back after this interview, and they said, "We want you to apply for the other job." So I ended up being the manager of their public works department, which was a huge job, actually, and 2,500 miles of road, everything from water treatment to sewage and garbage collection and everything, just everything that entails public works. Enjoyed it, but I was never meant to be in a government function.
A government employee?
No,
See,
no.
I can see you doing that.
No, I was, I mean, I may be political, but not that kind of political. So subsequent to that, I moved around to a larger municipality that was around Edmonton. It was the county of Strathcona, and it was substantially bigger. I had the responsibilities, and at that time was the largest hamlet in the world, Hamlet being a village without a church. And it was Sherwood Park, but it had 40,000 people, and we had all of the rural area, and I had the same kind of responsibilities. Subsequent to that, I got approached by John Deere. One of the local John Deere representatives came to me and said, we were looking for somebody to get into the John Deere industrial business. You seem to fit the bill. And I ended up meeting some of the executives from John Deere Corporation. They flew into Edmonton and interviewed me over some salmon locks. And the next thing I know, we were invested in a John Deere business in British Columbia.
Yeah, so 2 provinces.
Yeah, and then got bought out by the Guinness family.
Yeah.
Stayed on for a while, and then I left because they wanted us to move to Vancouver and start still as a partner, but much less of a voice in the company. We had lots of partners, and the Guinness family were the majority shareholders.
But it was it that career then that took you to the Okanagan?
Yeah, that moved us to the Okanagan Valley, and I wasn't unfamiliar with the Okanagan. I'd lived there before and skied there, and my brother had been there, and so I was very familiar with that part of the world.
And so then post-exit on that
I was playing
company.
I was the president of the Vernon Men's Club, which is really they pushed me into it because I had nothing else to do, and I was too young to retire. I sold my shares in the John Deere business, and I kept pushing, playing cards actually with Tom Ford, who was the founder of Kal Tire.
Yeah.
And his best friend was a guy by the name of Lyle Hansen, who happened to be an MLA, but he was the Minister of Highways for the province of British Columbia. So he had a fairly high position, and we'd play cards and play gin and at this Vernon Men's Club, and I would keep saying to Tommy, you need to hire me. You need to hire me. You need to hire me. And eventually, Lyle Hansen over cards looked over his cards, and he looked at Tommy and he said, hire the SOB. So when I talked to Lyle subsequent to that, I said, Lyle, you were responsible for me getting hired at Kal Tire. And he goes, guilty as charged.
So with Kal Tire then, or I guess in the equipment business, had you traveled much internationally?
Yeah, quite a bit, but not more like to the United States. But I did get to a few other spots, with John Deere, and certainly with my previous jobs. I didn't travel as much, but I was not unfamiliar with travel for sure.
But the bulk of your time with Kal Tire in your that career path, right, which was almost 20 years?
Yeah, I retired from Kal Tire in 2013, and I think it was about 18 years, more or less, 18, 19 years.
The bulk of that, they exported you, is that
right?
right?
Yeah, they did, Keith. I was, my good friend and the guy that I answered to originally was Archie Stroh, and who's not unfamiliar to this group, the tire industry. Famous in his own right for sure. He came to my office one day and said, we are thinking, or we have purchased a company in Chile after Finning had purchased Gildemeister, who was the cat dealer in Chile, and they said, we think the streets are paved with gold in Chile and we want to send somebody down. Are you interested? And I said, sure, just off the cuff. And I went home and talked to my wife, and she was just all over it. Just said, yeah, let's go. And I found out later that they offered it to me because I was expendable. So if they lost me, they didn't. They thought that they weren't losing much. So anyway, they sent me down and with the family, and we lived in Antofagasta for I guess about 3.5 years, and then I continued to travel for probably the better part of 15 or 16 years in that realm. In that time, also I ended up in Mexico for 3 years. So
in Hermosillo.
In Hermosillo, yeah.
And they chose you in those markets because you were fluent in Spanish?
No, when I started, I certainly wasn't fluent in Spanish, but I mean, I guess my proficiency now is because of a lot of practice and a lot of errors and a lot of. But I can get my way around in a Spanish culture. But I have to say that my success, probably 99.9% of any success that I had, was attributed to Carlos Zuniga. Yeah.
And who still
he
leads the Chilean operation or the facility in Antofagasta.
Yeah,
right?
he's the country general manager for Kal Tire in Chile. Yeah, and he's a remarkable guy. He's absolutely remarkable.
Yeah.
I carry him in the same stead as I carry you, Keith.
Oh wow! Well, that's why we both. I was trying to find a way to work in. Sí, claro.
No. Yeah, that's a bad joke.
I know that gets under your skin.
Yeah.
But, which is why I say it so often, as does Carlos. So I know you wanted to. I don't want to say retire it at a reasonable age, but when you still had your youth, if you will. And
I still do, Keith.
And you still do. But then we connected, and we've worked together for some time. Keep in the game, if you will. But I've often joked as you as that international man of leisure, or it's the most interesting man in the world, or something like that.
Well, I accept all those accolades, but certainly. I wouldn't consider myself that. I've certainly traveled a lot. That is for sure.
Yeah. So this conference, right? And I don't know if you found in Chile that the streets are paved with gold or maybe with copper, but that's obviously a massive OTR business in that economy, and Hermosillo, Mexico, as well.
Yes.
What has this conference meant to you, other than the tomfoolery that occasionally we may find? But
well, if I can just step back 2 seconds, I want to clarify one thing that I said, and that the streets are paved with gold in Chile. We didn't really think that. We just thought that we were going to be able to develop a pretty good business, and subsequently Kal Tire has done that, and the same in Mexico. And you're right, it's a huge market potential. So, we as North Americans, and in particular Canadians, we went down there, and I think we got a lesson. We got a lesson into how to be a lot more generous with the people from Chile. We had to understand the culture before we could do business in Chile. So what this conference means, if I can skip to there.
Sure. And this being the Off the Road conference, which we are gathered here for.
Yeah. Well, we were always supported by the management in Kal Tire to go to this conference. Tom Ford, and I don't know exactly, but Tom Ford always held people like Brad Reagan Sr. in high regards, because they exchanged a lot of information about OTR retreading, and back in the day, I think it was safe to say that Bradley Reagan Sr. was pretty much a trendsetter or
pioneer.
Almost, yeah, and he had a lot of tricks of the trade, if you will, and I think Tom was pretty attentive, and at these meetings, there was an awful lot of that. Yes, there was a reason to go have a meeting, talk about things, and go golfing, and maybe there were some write-offs, which is a good thing.
Yeah.
But I think we came out of this, and I know for a fact that our predecessors came out with some really good connections. It's kind of an interesting. You are competitors in some areas, in some arenas, and in other arenas you're not. And even though you are a competitor, you're always willing to help and share. And when you get to know them a little bit better, you get to know their families, their wives, their kids. It's different, and that's what we found at these. It was a social convention for sure, but there was a tremendous amount of information exchange.
It's a fraternity of sorts.
It is a fraternity for sure.
Yeah.
Once you're in the club, you're in the club.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's not really restrictive. I mean, anybody can get in the club.
It's true.
But once you're in, they don't let you out.
Yeah, and I was going to say, I think the thought comes to mind, the philosophy that a rising tide raises all ships, right? So
Correct.
To your point, while there's some competitors, right, I think these few days of gathering are sharing some information, best practices, the panels, right? I mean, it's just a conference that, in my experience, I've always looked forward because even if things aren't right in your wheelhouse per se, it's a who's who of the industry sharing information and education. And as big as the world is, as big as the tire industry is, when you start talking about, earth mover and 51 and 57 and 63 inch, the world gets very small very quickly.
Oh yeah, and quite frankly, I mean, it's an industry onto its own.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like any other industry that I've been associated with. I think it's it's highly technical. Just the procedures, the mounting, dismounting, the repairing, the rotations, the things that have developed, the TPMS systems. Now that Bridgestone and Michelin and everybody have for their customers, and the interaction and how it's working, on time. Like I was able to read data here on my phone, and I could tell whether a truck was running a hot left tire in Chile.
Yeah.
And I mean, that kind of
analytics,
analytics, and more importantly, of value to the customer when you can demonstrate that. You're not just a tire fitter, you're a tire technician.
Yeah. And
your company is offering a very, very high valued service.
Yeah.
And in U.S. dollars, I mean, a 63-inch tire is $65,000 or $55,000.
Yeah.
I think it's $60-some thousand now, but I won't. I'm sure that there's deals out there.
I was going to say, it depends on who has inventory and how much, right?
That's right.
Yeah. So, and you've rode some of those waves with shortages. Right?
Oh goodness, yeah. That's a podcast in itself.
Yeah. We won't get into that.
No,
so,
please.
So, what would you classify yourself as semi-retired then? I guess.
Well, I guess you should answer that, Keith. I spend some time working with you closely and with your group.
Yeah.
I think I still have the ability to contribute something.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
And with Dave from Haltech.
Yeah.
And I think I have a fairly good understanding and a current understanding of markets in Latin America and South America and Mexico.
Yeah.
And I think I can contribute to that.
Yeah, and that's where I was going, was in your leisure time. You are still quite active and quite the skier, right?
Oh, I certainly put on the boards, but I ski with a lot of guys who are pretty good skiers, and I like to try and keep up. Yeah.
And you say boards, but we're talking skis, not a snowboarder.
No, I'm afraid I'm not a snowboarder.
Those two don't mix. Is that right?
Well, in places like Alta and in near Salt Lake, they don't allow snowboards.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
The renegades, are they kind of the?
Well, I wouldn't say that on tape. No, they're just. It's a different style. So they make different moguls on the hill,
Yeah.
They make moguls like the front of an old Volkswagen, so they're hard to ski, and
Yeah.
especially on old bones like mine, Keith.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And then in summertime, you are quite the mountain biker. Is that right?
Well, again, I
Stay active.
I mountain bike with some pretty good mountain bikers. Yeah. But it's really interesting because now when they fall, their hearing aids pop out, stuff like that. You know, we spend a lot of time looking for hearing aids and things. But no, we're a pretty active bunch. Yeah. So we're winter and summer, and like to keep busy.
And then any bucket list type ski destinations, or I think you've got one coming up, but
Well, yeah. Last year, my beautiful wife and I went on a trip. We kind of like to live the Bedouin lifestyle. We kind of just travel around, and I love riding the trains in Europe. So what we did is we combined a trip where I could go and hit some of the more prominent, larger ski resorts, mountains, where the World Cup downhills and that stuff were being held or had been held, and I'd watched for years, and skied some of the courses, which was quite interesting. And I didn't finish, and so this year I'm going back, and I'm going to do a couple of weeks and hit some of them. So I'll send you some pictures of me and Zermatt with the Matterhorn in the background and that sort of stuff.
And occasionally drink a beer at night.
No, Keith, no. I'll be very, very, very good about that. Probably a little bit of tea and with some honey,
and maybe read the Bible.
Well, no, I probably won't do that either. Maybe I should.
So, if you had a spot that you and I could have a beer and hoist that up and pick anywhere in the world, where might that be?
Well, Keith, you and I have had a few spots where we've had a few.
Maybe grapes.
Yeah, well, we did that. We've done the grapes. We've done a lot in Chile. We haven't gone crazy or anything, but we've had some interesting locations where we've shared good food and a few drinks.
Yeah.
I would like to say someplace in New Zealand would be cool.
Okay.
I'd love to take you to India. I mean, we would never get too far because people would want to come up and touch us both. Because they probably haven't seen a lot of people like us. But,
no, I've not been to New Zealand. I've been to India,
but India is pretty cool, as you know.
I was going for another one, but maybe you want to keep that one secret, right?
Well,
so that it doesn't get too populated.
Well, give me a hint.
Well, I was going on the San Carlos.
Well, now, yes. Again, that's probably one of my wife's favorite places. And I think that, yes, I think we need to coordinate ourselves and get down to the soggy peso.
Soggy peso.
I was going to say the foggy clam.
Oyster or something. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, soggy peso in San Carlos.
Well, rumor has it that this conference next year is going out of the continental U.S. I won't say out of the U.S.
Oh, really?
So going to the Caribbean. So by the time this airs, it'll be public knowledge. But yes, so not Mexico though, Puerto Rico. So
well, we've been to Puerto Rico.
We have been with Chichi.
Yes, you and I golfed with Chichi Rodriguez.
Yeah.
One hole.
Yeah, exactly.
If I remember correctly.
Exactly.
He didn't like us calling him Chai Chai.
No. We were uneducated swine, I think is maybe what he referred to us as. But,
Chai Chai Rodriguez.
Yeah. Anyway, all right. Any closing thoughts for just in general?
Oh, sure. I've got a lot of things. I've thought a lot about this.
Well, go ahead. What do you got?
I think, Keith, like if you're talking about, our relationship and, what I saw. Yes, I mean, when I retired in 2013, I really wasn't looking to go out and continue on. But when you came to me and said, maybe you can do something with us, maybe, not understanding. But I always had this, I had a good feel because you were, you had started a business, you had gone out on your own, and you and your partners. I don't take anything away from Tim and Lewis and Brett.
Yeah.
They certainly were contributory.
Part of the crew. Yeah,
they
absolutely.
were big time part of the crew, but you yourself had this innate ability. You had this marketing flair.
Okay.
You knew how to get into the business. You knew how to approach the business. You knew how to sell the products you had, and you knew how to gloss them up.
Yeah.
You knew how to present yourself, and I think that I learned an awful lot in that respect, watching you sort of work your magic that way. And I used to criticize you a lot of times, and I would say,
very often.
Well, I mean, you guys were constantly like a murder of crows. Like if something was new and shiny, that would be the thing that you wanted to sell.
Yeah.
And forget about all the other stuff. Ooh, we got something new. But that was in the infancy of your business, and I've seen that maturity go and develop over time. And I think you've taken your strengths and you've built a company. You and your partners have built a company that is nice to see. And I don't believe that I'm contributory, but I mean, I've certainly been that
part of our journey for sure.
Well, I think I'm that little guy on your shoulder once in a while saying, don't do this, or hey, do that. Now, I can't say that you've ever listened to me, but at least there was a conscience there at times.
Quite literally at this conference, you did not make it a few years ago. And,
correct.
And not wanting to have the conference without Chris, we launched or birthed Flat Brothen, if you will.
I did.
So somewhere I think I probably actually literally have a photograph with you on my shoulder because we printed and laminated 4 or 5 of them, and they were quite the hit. Flat Brothen made his way.
I was everywhere. I was on the golf carts.
Yeah.
I was at the
I
was at the dance. I was on a guitar.
Yeah. So anyway.
It was kind of cool.
It was very cool.
It was certainly something that I take as something that's an honor for me to accept.
Well, we had you here even though you weren't here.
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
So, anyway, it's one of the beautiful things of this conference. Everybody wanted to get together, and people ended up coming around wanting to just be with Flat Brothen. So. Anyway, we're thrilled to have you here in 3D.
Well, thank you.
And I appreciate you joining the podcast and catching up and sharing with us a little bit.
Oh, perfect. Thanks very much, Keith. I do appreciate it.
You're very welcome. All right. Thank you, buddy.
Thank you.
We'll see you. And we'll see you next time on As the Tire Turns. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of As the Tire Turns. Join us next week when our guest is TIA Secretary Russ Devens from McCarthy Tire.